Hello YouTube friends, I'm Mark Millian for CompuMove Systems. What I have for you today is a look at CompuMove's salesperson and commission account setup. First we'll talk about what we mean with salesperson and commission accounts, and then we'll look at how we create new accounts, and then we'll look at how we integrate worker resources with those created commission accounts. And then as part of that, we'll talk about assigning general ledger expense account allocations. And then finally, we'll look at linking those salesperson and commission accounts to user login accounts. So, fair amount of ground to cover today. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. So the first thing to talk about here is what we actually mean when we're talking about a commission account. Now you might be saying, I don't pay anyone any commissions, my workers are hourly employees, and that might be completely true, but we use the word commission account to refer to actually several related things, so you're going to be using the commission accounts even if you don't pay people on a commission basis. So let me dive a little further into what that means. I'm going to go to the Setup menu, and I'm going to go to the Commission Accounts menu, and you can see when I land here that there's different classifications of commission accounts. There's salesperson, there's contractor, company driver, company worker, third party, and also a provision for reserve accounts. So even if you don't pay anybody any commissions, if you have a salesperson, you're going to create an account for that salesperson in the commission account system, whether they're paid on commission or not. Now it's possible that going forward you might start paying somebody commissions or you might never do it, but nonetheless because of the need to have that connection, it all happens in the same place. So let's go ahead and talk about what we mean. And I'm going to add two new commission accounts. I'm going to add one for a salesperson, and I'm going to add one for a worker who I want to appear on the worker resource list. Now I don't need to add a commission account for a worker if they're not going to get commission. I only need to add a commission account for a non-commissioned person if they're a salesperson. So I realize that's a bit of a subtle distinction, but I think the reasons for it will make more sense as we go forward. So I'm going to click on Add, and up comes the Commission Account Setup. And you can see there's an area at the top where I can define who the person is, but I'm also quite interested in this right here, where I'm going to define the commission account type, because that's going to control a lot of different things going forward. So let's go ahead and start with a first name. So I'm going to call this person Roger Jones. Now you can see immediately below that I've got a provision for an account name and also for a name type. So if you're working with a true independent contractor or perhaps a third party who you pay commissions to regularly, you can actually cycle them into the company name type, and then it will show them under their company name or under their account name instead of showing them as an individual. And then ultimately that has implications for how we might prepare 1099s at the end of the year. In this case, I'm going to go with Roger as an individual, so I can just leave the account name field blank. Now if I want to enter Roger's federal tax ID number, either a social security number or an EIN number for an entity that I'm doing business with, I can do that. I can also enter an account reference number. And this can come into play later when I'm doing integration with things like downloading van line commission settlements. So if there's claims chargeback or fee chargebacks that come at me from a van line relationship where they're referencing them with a driver number that's in the van line system, then if I use that in the account reference, it'll make it possible to make a match. That's of interest, but it's not what I came here to do, so I'm just going to say that and move on. What I am very interested in, though, is the commission account type. So in this case, I'm going to pull that down and I'm going to say salesperson. When I do that, it assigns him as a salesperson into a commission account group. If you've only got one company in your CompuMove, then it's going to make that choice for you. If you are a multi-divisional structure, either multiple divisions or even multiple division groups with separate federal tax ID numbers, then you're going to need to make a decision from that pull-down list there regarding which one you choose. In this case, I've got a single company, so it's made the choice for me and I don't have to worry about it. Then the next thing I'm going to do is choose a general ledger distribution account. This is the expense account that a commission, should I pay one, is going to get allocated to by default. Now I will say that we can create commission schedules and have individual line items go to different general ledger accounts. But commission schedules is a topic for another video, so I'm not going to go any further than that. In this case, I'm just going to say I want to include my default. I'm going to pick commission sales in the number sequence, the 47,000. Next up is the eligible divisions. If I've got a multi-divisional company, I can choose that. Next up is vendor groups. If I'm going to be paying commission to this person, I'm going to want to create a linked vendor account. So I'm going to say I might do that. So I'm going to say create vendor, and I'm going to pull the list down, and I'm going to choose the vendor group for commissions. You can have an unlimited number of vendor groups. In this case, I've got one for normal vendors and one for commissioned entities, so I'll pick that. The next button down, or the next choice down, is the linked reserve account. Reserve accounts are a system where you can set a dollar reserve amount that a contractor has to keep and maintain for things like claims or truck liability or something like that. If you don't do reserves, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, then don't worry about it. But I will say that reserve accounts themselves are a complex subject and the subject of another video. So right now I'm not going to select create reserve. I'm just going to leave that alone. Then the final area is the contact information. If I enter an email address and I enter particularly a cell phone number here, then that can drive notifications. This salesperson can get text notifications of upcoming sales appointments, and they can get email calendar events that would integrate with a smartphone for the same thing for sales appointments. Or I could also, of course, just send text messages to my salesperson just on an ad hoc basis. So I could fill those out if I want to. It's not necessary to press on with what we're doing here, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say add. And so when I've done that, now I've got Roger Jones, my salesperson. It shows me the general ledger code for his liability group. It shows me the vendor that got created because I asked it to. So now let's add somebody else, and there's going to be some differences with this because this is going to be a worker. I'm going to click on add, and we're going to call this guy Sam Smith. Oops, let's spell his name right. We're going to call this guy Sam Smith. We're going to say he's DBA Smith Trucking. And so we want to possibly see him that way on the list, but we also want to pay him out that way. So I'm going to put him on company name. So when I see that, and then I might have a federal tax ID number, I will make one up. And then I might have a reference number. Maybe this is somebody who's an independent owner-operator for a van line, and so I want to have that reference. So now I'm going to pull this list down, and I'm going to say this person is a contractor. And so when I do that, I get a different general ledger group that he goes into. And the other thing that happens is that the checkbox to include on the schedule worker list checks by default. That does not happen with a salesperson. Only happens with the non-salesperson commission types. And then further, I can choose from my worker type list what category I want this person to go into. So where that's going to land is on the worker list. So this will, in an integrated way, create a schedulable resource on the schedule worker list for this person, which is not something that I'm going to do for the salesperson because the salespeople are in their own account. So I'm going to pull this list down, and I'm going to say go down to my subhaulers. Suppose this person is an interstate subhauler. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a vendor account like I did for my salesperson, and I'm going to say account payable commission. In this case, I might want to make a reserve account for this person. So I'm going to say create reserve, and then it will create an account for me. Email address information, cell phone information, that's the same. So I'm going to go ahead and say add. And so now I've got that person set up with Smith Trucking, and it also created the matching reserve account. You can see that this in the reserve column relates to the reserve account that got created here, so it actually created them both at the same time. And it did create the linked vendor account, and then it also put him on the worker list as a driver. So there's a fair amount going on there, and the commission account list actually ties together general ledger items, worker resource items, expense items, and commission account and vendor account items all in the same place. And that's to achieve the integration of scheduling, operations, commission, check writing, 1099 printing, resource capacity, all in one integrated function, which of course is a significant aspect of what CompuMove does. And so that's why all these different things are happening on this commission account setup screen. So let's take a closer look at a couple other things, and we'll see what that got us. If I close out the commission account setup, and I go back to setup, and I go to worker resources, now I've got Sam Smith for Smith Trucking in there. So it's actually created in the driver category a linked commission account called Smith Trucking, because that's the entity that he's doing business under, and then it shows Sam Smith is his name. In the same way, if I were to go to the work system and start a new quote, and let's just do an hourly move, and then go to the salesperson list, now Roger Jones, the salesperson I just added, he's now available for salesperson scheduling and assigning estimates and so on. So you can see that that commission list is really doing two different things. It's creating commissionable workers, and it's also creating salespeople, whether they're commissionable or not. And so the overlap, the necessary overlap between those functions, is why that list works the way it does. If we want to create a user who's tied to one of these accounts, we do that through the user account setup. Now we might do that for two different reasons. We might do that because this is a salesperson and we want him to be funneled into his own sales activity when he logs in. We also might use it because we want to use driver mode on a tablet in the field. And so when we want a person to log in, we want him to see if he's in the worker classifications. We want him to see his assigned jobs for the day. We want worker mode on a tablet to funnel him directly into today's jobs and not distract him or even allow him to go browsing around and look at other things. So let's look at how that works. So if I go to Setup and I go to User Accounts, now to go into User Accounts, you need to have permission to do this. Alright, so let's go one further. If we want to create a user who's tied to one of these accounts, we do that through the user account setup. Now we might do that for two different reasons. We might do that because this is a salesperson and we want him to be funneled into his own sales activity when he logs in. We also might use it because we want to use driver mode on a tablet in the field. And so when we want a person to log in, we want him to see if he's in the worker classifications. We want him to see his assigned jobs for the day. We want worker mode on a tablet to funnel him directly into today's jobs and not distract him or even allow him to go browsing around and look at other things. So let's look at how that works. So if I go to Setup and I go to User Accounts, now to go into User Accounts, you need to have permission to do this. So I'm assuming you've got administrative permission if we've gotten this far. So I'm going to go ahead and say Add User. And up comes the User Account Setup screen. I give them a name. I can give first name, last name. But what I'm particularly interested in here is this worker link box. And that's how it relates to today's discussion of the commission accounts. So if I pull that list down and I take the new salesperson that I added, and that was Roger Jones, I make that link. So now let's go ahead and make R. Jones his user account, not a bad thing to do. And then I'm going to say Roger is his first name, Jones is his last name. I've linked to his commission account. There's other things going on in this screen with task roles and redirecting and import sources. Discussion for another day. We're not going to do it right now. But I'm just going to pull this user list down and say this is a high-level salesperson, and then I'm just going to go ahead and save it. So now what has happened is I've got Roger Jones as a user account, but I've also got that linked to the created salesperson account. So now if I create a new lead or schedule an estimate, and then Roger logs in with his user account, he's automatically linked to his associated salesperson account, so it funnels him right into his activity. So if I were to do the same thing for a worker, it'd be exactly the same. I add a user, I can go to the worker link, and I've got Smith Trucking. I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to just go D. Smith. Now it's associated with Smith Trucking. Let's put him in say a dispatch mode and save that. And now I've done exactly the same thing. I've just got a user account. And so depending on the level, it's no different than any other user account. But it is now linked to a worker account. So if I'm giving Dave tablet to go out in the field and he's in worker mode, when he logs in, then the tablet in worker mode is just going to take him directly to his jobs for the day. And then that's all he's going to be able to see. That's all he's going to need to see, and we're going to go from there. So then the final piece of this is what happens if we've got a saved commission account, if it's a worker or a salesperson. If we go into a job that we have on our system, and I know we've done a few, let's go into the Tom Jones job from a previous video that we made. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the commission screen and we're going to say add, and then you can see there's the Roger Jones salesperson account that I made, and there's the Smith Trucking commission account, worker commission account that I made. And I can pick them, and I can start a commission, and I can start doing commission allocations. Now, how you actually do commission allocations is, again, a subject for a different video. But I wanted to bring you here and show you where that came from. So to recap that a bit, because I know there's several moving parts here. If I go to Setup and I go to Commission Accounts and I start adding people to commission accounts, it can show up on the worker list. So if I'm going to Setup and I go to Worker Resources, I'm actually seeing those associated accounts. In the same way, if I go to Setup and I go to User Accounts and I look at the commission accounts that I've associated with a given user account, it's showing up there. And also, if I go to Setup and I go to Vendor Accounts and I go to the Commission Vendor Group, then you can see that I've got the associated commission accounts linked to that vendor account. So truly the commission account screen is at the crossroads of an intersection of 4 different lists that ties everything together. So I know that that's a complicated structure in some ways, and it's got some layers to it, but it's also critically important because it allows the seamless integration that is, of course, a hallmark of CompuMove to take place without you having to go multiple places to get things done when time comes to process actual shipments. So I hope that gives you a running start in how to set up commission accounts and exposes you to the critical highlights of it. As always, when you get into that and you find you've got questions of any kind, please reach out to us at our office. We'll be glad to help. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.